I never thought anything would happen when my husband invited his colleague Mark over for dinner that Friday night. We'd been married 8 years, comfortable, routine, the kind of life that feels safe until it suddenly doesn't. Then Mark walked through the door, and as he reached up to hang his jacket on the hook by the entrance, his shirt lifted just enough. That sharp line of his hip, the dark trail of hair disappearing into his waistband. My breath caught right there in my throat. In that single second, something shifted inside me, quiet and irreversible. I smiled politely, offered him a glass of wine, but inside I was already hiding a secret I didn't yet understand. God, why did my eyes linger? The next few weeks, Mark started coming over more often. Work projects that ran late, just dropping off some files. He'd say with that easy half-smile. Every time he stepped into our kitchen, the air felt thicker, heavier, like the room itself was holding its breath with me. One evening while I was washing dishes, sleeves pushed up, suds clinging to my arms, he stepped behind me to grab a glass from the cabinet above. His chest brushed my back for half a second, no more than that. The warmth of him, the faint scent of his cedarwood cologne mixing with the lemon soap suds, sent a sudden jolt straight through my body. I told myself it was nothing, just an accident, but my hands trembled as I rinsed the plate, water splashing louder than it should have. I could still feel the ghost of that brief pressure even after he moved away. We fell into a dangerous little routine after that. Mark would arrive, my husband would get called away for a quick work call in the study, and suddenly it was just the two of us at the kitchen island. The light overhead felt too soft, too intimate. One night he reached across me for the wine bottle, his forearm grazing my breast through the thin cotton of my blouse. Neither of us pulled away immediately. The fabric felt impossibly thin against his skin, like there was almost nothing between us. In my head I kept repeating it like a prayer, or a warning, HES your husband's colleague. This is wrong, stop. But the heat pooling low in my belly whispered something else entirely, something hungry and ashamed and impossible to ignore. My pulse was loud in my ears. I kept telling myself I was imagining it all, that the way his eyes found mine across the table was just politeness, that the way he lingered when saying goodbye was nothing more than friendliness. But every time he left, the house felt emptier, quieter, and I felt restless in my own skin. My husband would kiss my cheek, grateful for the nice evening, completely unaware. And I would smile back, nodding, while inside my thoughts kept circling back to that brush of his arm, that warmth, that cedarwood scent that seemed to cling to the air long after he was gone. What was happening to me? I loved my husband. I did. Yet here I was, standing at the sink again the next morning, replaying that half-second contact until my cheeks burned. Another evening, same pattern. Husband in the study on a call, voice muffled through the door. Mark and I clearing the table. Our hands nearly touched when we both reached for the same plate. I pulled back first, quickly, and our eyes met. He didn't smile this time. Just looked at me for a beat longer than necessary, something unreadable flickering across his face. The kitchen island suddenly felt too small. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and uneven. HES your husband's colleague. I thought again, the words like a shield I kept raising and lowering, but my body wasn't listening. It remembered the heat. It craved the nearness. And when he finally stepped back to give me space, the absence of him felt almost worse than the contact. I washed my hands slowly after he left that night, letting the cool water run over my wrists, trying to steady myself. The house smelled faintly of cedarwood and red wine and something else I couldn't name. My husband came out of the study, stretching, complaining lightly about the late call. He pulled me close for a quick hug, familiar and safe. I hugged him back, burying my face in his shoulder, but my mind was elsewhere. On a forearm that had grazed too close, on eyes that had held mine a moment too long. The guilt settled in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold. Yet when I closed my eyes later in bed beside my sleeping husband, it wasn't his touch I felt replaying on my skin. It was that brief electric warmth from the kitchen. And I hated how much I wanted it to happen again. The routine continued, pulling me deeper each time. I started noticing little things. The way Mark's shirt sleeves were rolled up just enough to show the muscle in his forearms, the low timbre of his laugh when he stood close. Each visit layered another secret moment onto the last, until the air between us felt charged, humming with everything we weren't saying. I told myself I could stop this anytime, that nothing had really happened. But my hands still trembled sometimes when I thought about it. And the ache, that quiet, insistent ache, only seemed to grow. I kept chopping the vegetables, the knife moving slower with each slice, when my husband stepped out to take the trash. Mark moved closer behind me at the counter, his hip pressing lightly against mine through the thin fabric of my summer dress. The contact was so subtle, yet it sent a shiver racing up my spine. I could smell the faint salt on his skin mixed with that cedarwood scent, warm from the evening air. My mind screamed at me, "This is wrong, I love my husband, stop this right now." But my feet stayed rooted. I didn't step away. The pressure lingered, warm and steady, until the front door clicked shut again and my husband's footsteps faded. "Yes, your husband's colleague." The words looped in my head like a desperate mantra, yet my body leaned into the almost touch, craving the heat that radiated through his clothes. My breath hitched, shallow and uneven, as I gripped the knife handle tighter to hide the tremble in my fingers. What was I doing? Why did the space between us feel like it was shrinking on its own, pulling me in with invisible gravity? The vegetables blurred in front of me, focus shattered by the way his presence filled the small kitchen, heavy and magnetic. One rainy Thursday my husband texted that he was stuck in traffic, the downpour turning the streets into rivers outside. Mark and I waited in the living room, the lights dimmed against the storm. A slow R&B song played softly from the speaker, the same one that had been on weeks ago during that first accidental brush. He sat beside me on the couch, closer than necessary, our thighs touching through the thin material of my skirt and his jeans. The texture felt electric, rough denim against my bare skin, sending tiny sparks dancing along my leg. I thought about my wedding ring glinting on my finger, about the vows whispered in a sunlit church, but the growing ache low in my belly drowned out every warning whisper of guilt. I shifted slightly, telling myself it was nothing, just two people sharing space on a rainy night. But the contact didn't break. His warmth seeped into me, steady and insistent, while rain pattered against the windows like a secret rhythm. My pulse quickened, loud in my ears, as I stared at the floor, afraid to meet his eyes. Just being friendly, I lied to myself, even as my skin prick led with awareness of how near his hand rested on the cushion, inches from mine. The song swelled, wrapping around us, and for a moment the room felt smaller, the air thicker, charged with everything unsaid. I swallowed hard, fighting the pull, yet I stayed right there, letting the forbidden closeness wrap around me like the storm outside. Alcohol became the excuse after a long work week, when my husband suggested drinks to unwind, to glasses of red wine, and in the room softened at the edges, laughter coming easier, the lamplight casting gentle shadows. Mark's eyes lingered on the neckline of my dress whenever my husband glanced away, a quiet heat in his gaze that made my cheeks flush. When I stood to refill the glasses at the counter, he followed, his steps quiet behind me. His hand rested on my lower back for a moment too long, the warmth of his palm burning through the silk like a brand I couldn't shake. Inside I screamed at myself to move, to step aside, to remember who I was and who he was. But instead I leaned back into the touch, just slightly, my body betraying every vow it ever made. The contact sent a wave of heat flooding through me, trembling and alive, while my mind fractured between shame and surrender. Chairman's voice carried from the other room, casual and trusting, completely unaware. Mark's fingers didn't press harder, didn't wander, but they stayed there, steady and warm, turning the simple act of pouring wine into something trembling with possibility. I could feel my breath catching, the ache deepening, as the scent of cedarwood and red wine mixed around us, intoxicating and dangerous. The glass trembled in my hand when I finally turned, our eyes meeting in the soft light. He didn't say a word, but the air between us hummed with tension, thick enough to taste. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic warning I kept ignoring. How much longer could I pretend this was innocent? The guilt clawed at my chest, sharp and cold. Yet the pull toward him felt like drowning in slow motion, sweet and terrifying all at once. And just as his hand began to slip away, my husband left for that 3-day conference on a gray Thursday morning. The house felt suddenly too big, every room echoing with his absence. I wandered through the silence, folding laundry that didn't need folding, when my phone buzzed. Mark's message lit up the screen. Need to pick up those reports okay if I swing by after work. My thumb hovered. I should have said no, told him to wait until Monday. Instead I type yes, heart already stumbling over itself. He arrived just as the evening light faded, the cedarwood scent of him drifting in with the cooler the moment the door opened. We stood in the narrow hallway, closer than two colleagues had any right to be. His fingers brushed mine when I handed him the folder, that single graze of skin sending a rush through me, so sharp I forgot how to exhale. Nothing's going to happen, I told myself, repeating it like a prayer. But my body was already listening to something else entirely, a low hum building beneath my ribs. The near misses piled up like storm clouds that wouldn't break. Late one evening he stayed to help me reach the heavy serving platter on the top kitchen shelf. He stepped in behind me fully this time, his chest pressing against my back, breath warm against the curve of my neck. I could feel the solid line of him through his clothes, unmistakable and overwhelming. My knees went soft, the wooden floor tilting beneath me. In my mind flashed my husband's trusting smile, the bed we shared, the quiet life we'd carved together. The guilt sliced deep, cold and merciless. Yet when his hand settled lightly on my waist, steadying me, I didn't pull away. We can't, I whispered, voice trembling, even as my body leaned back into that impossible warmth just a fraction. The next night he came over again, claiming unfinished work that couldn't wait. My husband had crashed upstairs after a brutal day, door closed, breathing steady in sleep. Mark and I sat in the dim living room, the same slow R&B song floating from the speaker like a memory we both recognized. His hand found my knee under the low table, palm rough and sure as it slid slowly upward beneath the hem of my skirt. The contrast of his call-used skin against my thigh made the room spin gently. Every moral fiber in me screamed to stop this right now, to stand up and walk away. Every inch of me begged for the opposite, craving the climb of those fingers. I closed my eyes, letting the sensation pull me under, the ache spreading like warm honey through my veins. His touch paused, questioning, and in that suspended breath I felt the full weight of what I was allowing. The house held its breath with me, rain tapping softly at the windows outside, my husband's faint snores drifting down from above like a distant warning. My pulse thundered in my ears, louder than the music, louder than reason. How had we gotten here again so quickly, so quickly? I should have moved his hand. I should have whispered an excuse and fled to the safety of the kitchen. Instead I stayed perfectly still, thighs parting the smallest amount, inviting the danger I knew I couldn't afford. He didn't speak, didn't rush. Just that slow, deliberate ascent, each centimeter sending fresh waves of heat crashing through me. The guilt clawed harder now, visions of my wedding band cold on my finger, of mornings spent laughing with my husband over coffee. Yet the pull was gravitational, inevitable, drawing me closer to the edge with every heartbeat. My breath came shallow, almost silent, as his fingers inched higher still, the fabric of my skirt bunching softly. I bit the inside of my lip to stay quiet, to keep from making any sound that might wake the sleeping house, or betray how completely I was unraveling. And then, just as the tension coiled tight enough to snap, his touch hovered there, so close, waiting for whatever came next. I stood frozen in the dim kitchen light, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape this moment entirely. My husband's suitcase wheels had barely faded down the driveway when the doorbell cut through the quiet house. Mark was already there, early, the sky still bruised with dawn. We didn't speak. Words felt too dangerous now, too close to confession. He stepped inside, and the cedarwood scent wrapped around me before his hands did. In the same spot where innocent brushes had once started everything, he pulled me against him. Not gentle, not hesitant. His mouth found mine, hungry and urgent, tasting faintly of salt and sleepless nights. My hands slid under his shirt, palms meeting the fever-warm plane of his skin, and something inside me simply gave way. All the whispered warnings, all the careful almost shattered like thin glass. We never reached the bedroom. Right there against the counter, clothes were pushed aside in a desperate, trembling haste that left no room for second thoughts. The feel of him was overwhelming, thick and insistent, wrong in every single way that felt devastatingly right. I bit my lip hard to keep any sound from breaking free, the metallic taste mixing with everything else flooding through me. Waves of guilt and something far sharper crashed together as I clung to his shoulders, nails pressing crescents into fabric and skin beneath. In that suspended instant I crossed a line I knew I could never step back over, the kitchen aisles cold under one bare foot while the rest of me burned. Afterward we stood there, breathing hard, ragged inhales sissing in the quiet. His forehead pressed to mine, damp with shared heat, and I could still feel the lingering warmth of his release on my thigh. The house smelled of cedarwood and something heavier now, layered faintly with the trace of my husband's aftershave from the night before, a ghost that made my stomach twist even as my body still trembled. I knew this was only the beginning of something secret and addictive. A door quietly swung open that neither of us would close. No one would know. Not yet. Mark kissed me once more before leaving, slow and deep, like he was sealing a promise we both already regretted and craved. His fingers lingered at my waist for one final second, then he was gone, the front door clicking shut behind him with terrible gentleness. I stayed leaning against the counter, legs unsteady, the aches spreading low and deep shame curling tight around my throat like smoke. I should have felt relief when the silence returned. Instead, the hunger bloomed wider, quieter, more dangerous than before. My hand drifted absently to the spot his mouth had claimed, tracing the faint heat still there. How easily the house had swallowed our secret, how easily I had let it. The morning light finally crept in through the blinds, painting everything in soft, accusing gold. I closed my eyes and let the guilt wash over me again, mixed now with that undeniable pull toward the next time he would come over. Because there would be a next time. I could already feel it in the way my pulse refused to settle, in the way the empty kitchen suddenly felt too large and too small all at once. This wasn't an ending. It was the first real breath after holding it for so long, and it tasted like cedarwood and ruin. I whispered my husband's name into the quiet, just once, like a question I no longer knew how to answer. The ache answered back, louder,